All right, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the Hinckley Institute. My name is Justin Hobbs and I work with the American College of National Security Leaders, and we're really excited to have you here with us today. Really quickly, the Hinckley Institute of Politics is a nonpartisan institute here at the University of Utah, and the Institute provides an array of transformative experiences for students through internships, forums, and classes. Hinckley forums seek to foster public discourse and civil debate on the most current and pressing issues, bringing in local, national, and international thought leaders. Today's forum is titled Medical Operations in Ukraine and is presented as the American College of National Security Leaders Spring Seminar here at the University of Utah. In an era of geopolitical tensions, cyber threats, and evolving national security landscapes, America needs professionals who can lead with integrity and make ethical decisions in complex environments. This panel will discuss the current state of medical operations in the Ukraine war, the medical innovations used in Ukraine, and how medical operations will evolve in future conflicts. We are in for a great conversation today, and it's my honor to welcome our panelists. I'll start by introducing our moderator, who is Lieutenant General Ronald Ray Blank. General Blank served as the 39th Surgeon General of the Army and was the only doctor of osteopathic medicine to hold the role. A graduate of the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, he began his career in Vietnam and retired after 32 years leading the Army Medical Command. He later served as president of the University of North Texas Health Science Center and held academic roles at several universities. General Blank has advised on bioterrorism and mass casualty preparedness, chaired major medical organizations, and received the Dr. Nathan Davis Award for Public Service. He has continued leadership in military and medical institutions, including roles at the Department of Veterans Affairs and international medical education organizations. I'll hand it over to him to get started, but first, please join me in welcoming our panelists today.
Well, very good, and thank you very much for the nice introduction. I'm sorry that I am not there with my fellow panelists and, of course, interacting with the audience, but I am fairly old, and as you get old, you have one job: don't fall. I failed, so I have a shoulder replacement that has kept me home and has prevented me from joining you. And I see Dr. Cannon there with a brace on his knee. Now that's, I don't think, from a fall, and he's certainly not old, but we are fellow wounded warriors, I suppose, as we heal. Well, let me begin by introducing our panelists. The first I'd like to introduce is Dr. Jeremy Cannon, who is professor of surgery at University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. He's a retired U.S. Air Force colonel, trauma surgeon specializing in all aspects of combat casualty care, hemorrhagic control, emergency surgery, and on. He has, in his career, deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan, has vast experiences, and has partnered with the U.S. Navy so that University of Pennsylvania is training their trauma teams. I think the other services are doing it at different places, but he certainly has maintained his involvement with combat casualty care and with the Air Force, being a Air Force Academy graduate. So, Dr. Cannon, we're delighted to have you here, and look forward to hearing from you. Next on the video is Dr. Matthew Bradley, who is a professor of surgery and the chair of the Department of Surgery at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences School of Medicine. He's a Navy captain, a trauma surgeon, who also headed the Regenerative Medicine Center in the Navy Research Department, I should say, in the Navy Research Center. He's deployed to Afghanistan. He has done multiple deployments on the Navy ship Comfort, going to the variety of places where care is provided from that ship. So, Dr. Bradley, welcome, and I'm sorry you're not here, but obviously with things going on and patients coming into Walter Reed and your involvement with that, you needed to be where you are, and that's back at the hospital. Last but not least, let me introduce Dr. Tom Thomas. Dr. Thomas is the Dean of the Eastern Campus and Associate Vice President of the West Virginia University Health Science Center. It's quite a mouthful, but I think I got it all. Anyway, Dr. Thomas is retired Major General with over 26 years active duty service in the Army. He's both a dentist and a physician, apparently never tiring of schooling, and is a otolaryngologist is in his day job. I think every one of you still see patients, which is something that sadly I don't do very much anymore, except I still do an occasional house call here at the beach where I live. Dr. Thomas was also the president of the Uniformed Services University before going to West Virginia to assume his current position. So, Tom, glad to see you as well. Let me just make, thanks, a couple of introductory remarks as we go into this panel. First of all, keep in mind as we talk about all the advances in treatment and the threats and the changes, there are some basics that need to be emphasized. Hand washing. Don't smoke because it causes vasoconstriction. Think about where your supplies are coming from. Think about all the kinds of things that you just normally do that all too often in a combat situation we tend to ignore because it's difficult to do. And you'll hear a lot about some things. And as much as we're going to talk about advances and new threats, I am struck in some ways by the similarities of trench warfare in World War I. Static conditions. I didn't mention when I introduced Dr. Thomas that he's been a medical volunteer in Ukraine and has seen firsthand these kinds of things. I just read another article that said one of the things people have to get used to when they go to the front lines, to the trenches, and there are trenches, is the almost constant bombardment, the artillery, the drones, the explosives. And so PTSD and traumatic brain injury are real things that are happening besides the physical wounds that one sees. So with that, I am going, and I should mention that I think some of the lessons that we're learning from Ukraine, and you'll hear about today, are going to be the basis for perhaps a pilot program at the University of Utah, setting up something and trying to figure out how we're going to deal with these not so much unique wounds, but different wounds from what we've been seeing in the past. So with that, to you, Dr. Cannon, please tell us the contrasts in the last 20 years of U.S. conflicts from a medical standpoint of how drones, vintage weapons, novel weapons have and will require a shift in our approach to medical care and in our thinking of how we provide it.
Well, General Blank, thank you for that generous introduction and for framing this conversation. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here at the invitation of the ACNSL and the Hinckley Institute. And it's a little intimidating to be the leadoff batter in front of this impressive lineup, but I'll do my best to kick things off. So you heard that both Dr. Bradley and I are trauma surgeons. I just wanted to back up in the spirit of some of our conversations yesterday. What is a trauma surgeon? What does that training look like? How do you become a trauma surgeon? So I'll just start with that and then launch into hopefully a nuanced answer to the very important question that General Blank just raised. So what is a trauma surgeon? That's my specialty of choice. That's where my career has led me. I would say that although I haven't personally seen the pit, what I've heard, everybody ask me, have you seen it? Have you watched it? That's apparently a pretty good illustration of what acute emergency life-saving care is like. My friend and colleague, Dr. Johnson, from the University of Utah here in the audience, would be like Dr. Robbie, running the show down in the pit. And then I would be more like, I think it's Dr. Garcia, who comes down as a surgical consultant when things get really wild and woolly. Uncontrolled hemorrhage, motorcycle crashes, falls from a building, or here in Utah, off a mountain. So I get involved in those sort of things. So I'll watch The Pit with you. If anyone here hasn't seen it, I'll commit to maybe watching an episode or two.
I haven't seen it.
Sure. All right, so you and I we'll play some catch up here. What did I do in my military career? I know this is against the advice of some of the folks in the ACNSL, but I'm going to recommend that if you're interested in this sort of thing, look back at some old MASH episodes. So YouTube has quite a few of them. I've watched a number of them. It was my uncle's favorite show. And what I really like about MASH, they seem to have had some excellent medical advisors. They don't shy away from the tough issues. One of the most touching and, for me, heartrending episodes is the episode where the star surgeon, Hawkeye Pierce, unfortunately loses a casualty on the table. And it's not, it's someone unique. It's someone that he knew. Someone that he knew from life, and it really got him right in the pit of his soul. His commander, trying to be a good commander, came up to him and was trying to console him, to encourage him, and he said, you know, Hawkeye, there's some rules about war. Rule number 1, young men die. Rule number 2, there's not a thing that doctors can do about rule number 1. So in my research and now policy part of my life, I spend a lot of time trying to unwind and undo rule number 1 and prove that rule number 2 is not correct. That there are things we can do so that when our young men and women deploy into a combat setting, we've got their back. We're not going to let them die. We're going to rescue them and truly avoid preventable death. In my research career, I've dug into the weeds of the historic combat casualty numbers, and one really startling fact jumps out to me, and that's that 1 in 4 of our combat deaths over the past century could have been prevented if our system had been more prepared. If we had trained the medical teams going forward, the trauma teams that are tasked with saving the lives of these critically injured service members, if we had trained them a little better, if our system had been designed to bring casualties back to surgical care rapidly, then 1 in 4 of those who died in combat would be with us, wouldn't have died. If you add that up, starting from the beginning of World War II, that's 100,000 service members who died because our system wasn't ready, because we lapsed into, and it's got a name now, the peacetime effect. We lapsed into the peacetime effect. Some folks call it the Walker dip. And sadly, we're entering that Walker dip now. We see it in the rust that's sort of creeping into our once expert military medical system with regards to combat casualty care, and we're not really at the top of our game. So that's what I do in my day job. I operate on critically injured folks that come into my trauma bay. I think about combat casualty care and how we can do better, trying to minimize or even eliminate preventable death. So how does that relate to the important question that General Blank posed, what about Ukraine? Well, first of all, I have to provide the caveat that any of my suggestions, ideas, insights, reflections, they're all secondhand information. We don't have any medical observers officially tasked in Ukraine, collecting these lessons learned, observing what's happening on the battlefield, improving our own doctrine so that we can be better, much less helping the Ukrainians in an official capacity. This truly is a high-intensity peer conflict. You heard that there are novel weapons being used. I think it's no secret that drones have dominated the battle space, but also historic weapons like thermobaric weapons are creating incredible devastation. And you've got 2 basically peer states going fisticuffs, and it's turned into a protracted conflict, trench warfare. So it's really ground down to a halt, and it's incredibly brutal, incredibly lethal, and with the addition of drones, machine learning, artificial intelligence, it's added a new twist and a new level of devastation. Really a revolution in military affairs. But sadly, the United States has been, in an official capacity at least, willing to be on the sidelines. not really capturing these lessons learned, and certainly not from a medical standpoint. Now, the silver lining here is that the academic medical centers like University of Pennsylvania, medical societies like the American College of Surgeons, and then NGOs really are stepping up. This is quite interesting, quite heartening. That's a lot of where my information comes from, is these friends and colleagues who have actually been to Ukraine. For example, the University of Pennsylvania, where I work, we've got teleconferences set up multiple times a week to engage with Ukrainian surgeons, to go through their cases at a very tactical level. So we're talking about individual patients with specific injuries. They're asking us, how would you manage this if this patient were in your hospital? How can we approach this very difficult condition? And we're coaching them through that on a routine, regular basis with established relationships. We're also sending surgeons over to Ukraine and bringing their surgeons to Philadelphia, to the University of Pennsylvania, to learn about limb salvage, soft tissue coverage, and to develop new techniques that were never before available in Ukraine, like operating under a microscope to do a free flap. So you move a piece of tissue that's perfused with blood vessels into an area that's not healing well, and you can cover that using microvascular techniques. And that was never available in Ukraine until we started this engagement with them through the University of Pennsylvania. Similarly, the American College of Surgeons is taking an important lead in this space. They're training trauma surgeons on how to perform trauma surgery in the way that we believe is life-saving. Get down to that blood vessel that's bleeding, tie it off, or reconstruct it, address bowel injuries, deal with large soft tissue wounds from these blast events. So there is a little bit of a silver lining, but we're unfortunately not capturing those lessons learned in any sort of official way. I want to step back for a second to what we achieved in Iraq and Afghanistan during the global war on terror from a medical standpoint, and contrast that with what we understand is happening on the battlefield in Ukraine. So during GWOT, Global War on Terror, we really had freedom of movement. We had air superiority, even air supremacy. So we could move our casualties pretty much wherever they needed to go. Secretary Robert Gates instituted the Golden Hour in Afghanistan. I would commend those of you that are interested in policy and leadership. His book called Duty, aptly titled, and he felt it was his duty, really appealing to what I view as an ancient concept. The Greeks called it themis, doing what's right. He went with his gut, he did what he felt was right, and mandated this Golden Hour, and it saved hundreds of casualties as a result. So the Golden Hour, freedom of movement, and actually relatively small numbers of casualties. So we could focus all of our attention on the most critically injured, and we didn't have to make these very challenging ethical decisions about perhaps letting some that might have salvageable injuries but are very severe, resource and labor intensive, go ahead and pass away. That didn't really happen in GWOT. We had the rapid transport. We found that tourniquets were life-saving. I've in fact got one in my bag over there. So keep one handy. They're good for what ails you if you've got massive bleeding. And blood transfusions were really important. So through all of that, we ultimately achieved what I have called battlefield medical supremacy. So we brought essentially the level 1 trauma center standard of care from Philadelphia, Chicago, Salt Lake City, you name it, into a combat theater and really exercised our will to save every service member that had salvageable injuries. So battlefield medical supremacy, I've written about that in an online journal called Strategica. So contrast that with Ukraine. How is the Ukrainian battle space, as we understand it, unfortunately in an unofficial capacity, different from GWOT? First of all, huge casualties numbers. If you had, say, 10 casualties in GWOT, multiply that by 10-fold or 100-fold, and you start to get to the number of casualties they're seeing in Ukraine. It's really World War II era levels of casualties. So these medical units are being inundated with these casualties. They're high energy weapons like thermobarics, creating massive blast and burn. The drones are creating an expanded kill zone. If you move, you die. And so unfortunately, that makes medical evacuation very difficult. How have the Ukrainians adapted? Well, first of all, from a system standpoint, there is no military versus civilian health system. They've merged. That happened on about day one, when they realized that all these casualties were flooding back for medical care. Their medical teams, unfortunately, are being targeted in direct violation of the Geneva Convention, so they've buried their medical teams. They're underground, which adds additional complexity, but they've adapted. And they've also discovered that because of these long transport times, you can't just leave the tourniquet on there. You have to reassess once you reach cover. So they're doing what's called tourniquet conversions. What are the implications for the U.S.? First, I think globally it's really important to appeal to Themis, to this idea of doing what's right. I strongly believe that we need to send medical observers now to collect direct data for our own doctrinal revisions, and also to help the Ukrainians. I think we should be deploying some of our med tech, some of the things that Dr. Johnson is working on, some of the things that this collaboration with the university will hopefully produce, into that very important test bed of an actual combat situation. So supporting prolonged combat casualty care with automation, integrating data tracking and AI-assisted care nudges in line with our treatment protocols, and then having that medical record follow the casualty through all phases of care. So as I wrap up, the peacetime effect is on us here in the United States. We've slid into basically obsolescence, and if we just let it go, it's going to result in preventable deaths when we enter our next conflict. So I think it really behooves us to open our eyes, get involved in Ukraine with at the very least, having medical observers integrate with the Department of Health and with the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Defense. And we need to learn how the Ukrainians have adapted. And then finally, it's, I think, very important to embed or test drive some of these tech innovations. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to hopefully address General Blank's question and look forward to the conversation.
Right, and we'll do questions at the end of the three panelists answering the questions. So thank you very much. It just is amazing the difference between the low-intensity conflicts that we've seen, small casualty numbers, I should say. If you're in it, it could be high intensity compared to what is, you said World War II. I would submit it's almost World War I of the mass casualties. It's just incredible. So over to you, Dr. Bradley, because I want to ask the question, given that the drones in particular are, as Dr. Cannon, you said, interfering with evacuation, you have to do casualty care in a prolonged fashion at the battlefield, at the front lines. You can't evacuate right away. So the question to you is, how do you do that prolonged casualty care? And who would be the primary providers? Do we send surgeons to the front? Do we train the primary care folks, even medics, to do that prolonged care? So that's the question. Over to you. How do we do it? Who does it?
Yeah, thank you, General Blank, for that question, and thank you for the invite. And I apologize for not being able to be there in person. I think as I speak here, there are a lot of similarities with what we're experiencing in Iran, with what the Ukrainians have experienced over the past several years. Tough to follow Dr. Cannon and all of his sage advice and wisdom, but I do want to piggyback off of some of his comments. And I want to take you back to when I was in Afghanistan. I was chief of trauma in Kandahar. At the time I was there, which was 14 years ago now, we had a brick and mortar building. I was the chief of trauma. I was the trauma surgeon. I had other general surgeons with me. I had orthopedic surgeon. I had a neurosurgeon. Now we were a Role 3 facility, but even some of our Role 2 facilities had multiple surgeons. We had multiple blood products available, resupply for blood products and other types of supplies. Really not an issue. Really, it was only dependent on the weather. We had air superiority. So Dr. Cannon mentioned the mandate of the golden hour. Never an issue. A casualty, one of our Marines, soldiers, airmen got injured. Tourniquet went on by first-line medical provider, a corpsman, or a medic. That tourniquet went on. They did what they could do in the field, and never was it any more than an hour that they came to a surgeon, where the surgeon then did damage control surgery. And then they moved along the echelon of care. And at the height of our wars, we were receiving casualties here at Walter Reed sometimes as early as 48 hours after injury. So that's quite remarkable. So to contrast that with some of what we've already experienced in Iran and what the Ukrainians have experienced over the past several years is it's all drone warfare now. And that has caused everybody to go underground, including the medical providers, as Dr. Cannon mentioned. They're in basements, they're underground bunkers, you name it. The drones are not only identifying where the fire is coming from, but then they're using them as as the munitions. And so you're left with right now self-care and battle buddy care. What we have seen is that tourniquets are being put on. They all have tourniquets, much like what we were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. But what they are now realizing is they were leaving tourniquets on, and they were leaving them on for hours and hours, and then you were left with a dead extremity. But they didn't really have a choice because they couldn't move the patient. There's no conventional or traditional ambulance. They certainly couldn't do air medical evacuation. They're all targets. So they have to move patients at night or under the cover now of perhaps some unmanned aerial ground transports. But even those can be targeted. So the delay in getting a patient from their point of injury to a surgeon is many hours. So that causes a huge problem with how you care for that patient up front. So who should be doing that? It's the surgical teams, as far as we understand, that yes, there's the no man's land, kind of like in World War I, but it's not the distance like World War I. The surgical teams underground are fairly close, within a couple of miles. So it's not necessarily the distance, it's just the inability to get them safely without being a target from point of injury to a surgeon. So can you get the surgeon any closer without putting the surgeon and the surgical team then at risk of getting injured and taking out your medical team? So that's potentially not the best of options. The other option is to train up the medics and even the regular infantry soldiers and Marines on some additional medical care, and we did that. We trained everybody on how to put a tourniquet on. And so I think that's what needs to happen. I think some additional training and some advances in AI technology that we are actually working on at the Uniformed Services in terms of advanced robotics and AI robotics to help control hemorrhage where you don't need a physician, or advanced robotics where you're the robotic assistant to the surgeon is helping at the point of injury. So I think those are the things we need to focus on that I think will help dramatically change the care of the patient who really can't get transferred from their point of injury to any kind of bunkered in medical facility.
Exactly. And if I can add, it's not exactly another question, but one of the students that and was my intern actually years and years ago is Rocky Farr, who was Special Forces medic in Vietnam and then went to the Uniformed Services University and later as a physician with Special Operations wrote a book, The Death of the Golden Hour. in which he refers to the guerrilla hospitals that existed in World War II. And they had a whole medical team there. And I think you're right. I don't see that as exactly the answer in Ukraine. But I wonder if some level of physicians, battalion brigade surgeons, that kind of person, family docs, could be trained not in surgery. They're not surgeons. You're the surgeon, but at least in doing the prolonged care that's required in the battlefield, in addition to what you're suggesting for medics.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that's certainly a viable option, and I'm going to be a little Navy centric because I'm in the Navy. But we have a lot of GMOs that support the Marines. They've done 1 year. They usually finish their internship, and then they're off as a general medical officer, usually supporting the Marines. And those are the folks that they'll push forward with the Marines, and you can certainly train them to do a lot.
So I'm speaking at the Academy of Family Practice in another week or two, and one of the points I make is you guys need to be thinking about this, and gals, of what your role is going to be in the front lines as we do prolonged casualty care. I think that's a huge problem, but a huge opportunity as well.
Absolutely.
So, thank you very much, and again, we'll hold questions until the end. So, General Thomas, up to you. So I know you've done a lot of combat tours, and you've been a medical volunteer in Ukraine. So how would you compare and contrast operational medicine capabilities in the Ukraine war, and what is the impact, do you think, the presence of medical volunteers on casualty care?
Well, thanks, Dr. Blank. I appreciate the softball question. But before let me collect my thoughts. While I'm doing, I'll stall. But I do want to thank the ACNSL for the invite here. And I especially want to thank the interns and fellows who are here. Some are in the room here. Can you guys please stand? You guys are, they're in the room? Yeah, please stand. Come on, lady, don't be so shy. Round of applause.
Bravo.
Great job. I'm kind of reminded of, you all know who the Mayo Clinic, you've heard of that, right? Report came out this week and says Mayo Clinic is still #1 in the world. Well, Mayo, actually 2 brothers that founded it, and they were Army surgeons in World War I. And so they had a lot of input. If you ever have a chance to read up on some of what their experiences were and what they said is kind of interesting. But I'm reminded of a quote from one of the Mayo brothers, and he said, "In war, the only victor is medicine."
Right.
And I think you're kind of hearing that from the panel group here. That these folks here have a lot of experience, and we're all victims of our experience. What they're telling you is what they've seen over time, and what you're seeing play out here is your fight. You don't have to be a medic. You don't have to be a doc, a nurse, medical professional. It's a team sport. If you go into civil service, or a senior executive service, whatever you decide to come, you're going to work for the State Department. Some of you folks I talked to a little bit ago that you're thinking about other options and careers. You're all contributing. Medical is a tool. It's a vital tool, and to many of us, we're biased on that, but it is true. And it's a team sport. We all work together, and we've seen that in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've seen that certainly play out in Ukraine and the next fight. Okay, so I just remind you that. I want to thank you for being here, #1. But thanks for being here because we're counting on you in the future. We got a couple, we have Navy, we have Army Guard, we have a young lady from Russia here. So, don't be shy about spreading the word around. So let me talk a little bit about, real quickly on my experience, and then we'll kind of go into, I want to answer General Blank's question about comparing and contrasting the 2 fights. I was a division surgeon for the 101st Airborne Division. That's an Army division. It's the premier division in the world. All right, okay. I was waiting for something.
No votes.
When 9/11 happened. So we come in, and I was in the first group that went to Afghanistan. Afghanistan was not a third world country. Afghanistan at the time was Middle Ages at best. And so what we went into was an immature theater. And we had to establish and mature our medical capabilities because we were taking real-time casualties. Now, the casualties we were seeing were gunshot wounds for sure, blast injuries, those types of things. And so we had to manage those, and we had to bring in a lot of medical assets. But because there weren't existing hospitals or certainly no medical footprint, a military medical footprint, we had to bring our own. So we rely on well-trained medics, forward surgical teams out there, and then combat support hospitals as we matured the theater. Now, Dr. Cannon had mentioned, I did 6 deployments. My last one was as a Surgeon General in Afghanistan. Before I get to that, I'll back up and say, we came back from Afghanistan. They said, you're getting ready for the next fight. What's that? Iraq. So I was with the division with the first group in Iraq. Different theater for sure. This is an up-and-coming second world country, more infrastructure, more capability. But the similarities is we really largely defeated the enemy fairly quickly. And as you've heard, from a medical standpoint, we had air superiority. So the golden hour was a real deal. Right. We had trained medics that could actually take care of a casualty at the point of impact, have a helicopter pick you up and take you back to a forward surgical team or combat support hospital within an hour. Then the theater evac policy the whole time, multiple tours over there was always 7 days. But as you heard Doc just mention, we get it back through Germany and then on to Walter Reed, usually in 48 hours. So the proof is in the numbers. Survivability rates of 90%, highest in the history of warfare, because we developed the finest vertically integrated trauma care system the world's ever seen. Medical superiority, we had no problem. We could resupply, we could send blood forward, we could send equipment forward, docs, nurses, all the medics, and we got very good at it. Now remember, this went over about 20 years of continuous combat operations. So to Dr. Cannon's point again, and I think Matthew said the same thing, Dr. Bradley said the same thing about when you have a lull in the operations, you have this, this walk or dip where the band's not together, so you're not as good anymore. That's the serious issue we face right now. So I'll fast forward a little bit to deploying to Ukraine. They needed medical help. Our young lady from Russia can attest to this. What did President Putin say? He said the greatest single tragedy of the 20th century was the fall of the Soviet Union. And he said his goal has been stated, and he fully intends to reinsert the Soviet Union. So just as they did in 1918, he invades through Ukraine on his way to Poland, Eastern Europe. So this is not a surprise. This is historical precedence. And what we're seeing here is the capabilities of the Russian military play out. This is old Soviet doctrine. This is not, we don't have air superiority, as you heard. He masses his tanks, his armor. He uses concentrated long-range artillery, and they kill everything. That's how they do it. Whereas before we had a disproportionate guerrilla, counter-guerrilla, counterinsurgency warfare in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now you've got the massed forces. Russia has lost more tanks than we even have. Think about that. They use those old T-72s, pop goes the weasel, right? And the Ukrainians are doing the best that they can to fight that fight and maintain their territory. But the Ukrainians don't think the war started in 22. I was there the first time when the war started. And you see what happens now. They go into this trench warfare scenario that you heard about. It's different now than it was, but there's still some of the same problems. The issue with Russia is we've attrited a lot of their capability. Now, in the medical capability, you heard about they don't have military medics in Ukraine. So they rely on the civilian healthcare system, a hybrid system. That brings civilians and military together and take care of their casualties. So what the Russians did is they targeted those hospitals deliberately. I was in the East, first time in Dnipro, in the hospital there, they blew it up. Right across the road is an old hotel full of orphaned and displaced children. They deliberately targeted that. You spend 4 or 5 days digging kids out. That's what it is. So mass numbers of casualties, unlike what we had in Iraq and Afghanistan, where you had casualties, primarily you have some gunshots, you have some blast injuries. This is a kind of a different wound pattern. A lot more blast injuries, burn injuries, and the numbers were staggering. So you heard the other gentleman talk about here, it has driven them underground. They need your help. They need our help because they don't have the organic capability to take care of those patients in the vast numbers. So sort of to your point, I wrote a note here because you had asked specifically of the role of medical volunteers. So what do the volunteers do? It's a double-edged sword, I think. Folks like myself want to come in, we think we're going to provide help, guidance, or whatever. Well, all the above. we had to work on setting up training for their medics because they didn't have the medics that were well trained for frontline. If they were drafting people, they said, "What did you do in the civilian world?" "I drove a beer truck." That's like an ambulance, you're a medic, right? And they put you out there with basically no training. So we brought in IFACs, individual first aid kits, trained the guys how to use it. Tourniquets are huge over there. That frontline response capability was built. And then getting their doctors and stuff, who were primarily civilians, and working with the medical volunteers, putting them, towards the front where we could get them. Remember, as you heard the gentleman say, they're targeted the whole time. So it's a different fight. I was there when they had the first drone-on-drone fight. I thought, what the hell is this, a movie? This is, you see the drones kamikazing each other and that kind of stuff. It's like, never saw anything like that. So technology, once again, as we develop weaponry and capabilities technologically, we also develop that medical capability, right, along with it. And we have to, it's inevitable. So with the volunteers that are there, they do train the medics, they expand the capacity, they also help with logistics and getting equipment, supplies, blood to these areas better than they could on their own. But again, you're a target, and we lost a lot of volunteers, wounded and killed because of that. And also another issue that it was interesting is the command and control. So that's the military term for how do you direct these guys? Who the hell's in charge, right? So the Minister of Health, which you mentioned, he don't get along with the Minister of War. They don't like each other, so it's kind of a goat rope. And you go to Kyiv and you talk to these guys and say, all right, we'll figure this out. Well, they have some of these volunteers over there. They're doing what they think is the best things. They're trying to, feed them, provide logistics, do medical care. But no one's really got their hand around them. And another point that I did want to make was the Ukrainians don't think the war started in 22. They think it started in 14 when the Russians annexed Crimea. So that's how long they've been at this fight. And they're attriting a lot of their capability. But we've also seen the attrition of Russia's capabilities too, the military, so they're bringing in others to help them with the fight, North Koreans, etc. So what does the future fight look like? I think what you're seeing in Ukraine is what we call, the military term is LSCO, large-scale combat operations. We used to train for that long time ago when we thought the Soviet Union was going to come down through the Fulda Gap in Europe and come to Western Europe when we fight that. The hordes of tanks and all this stuff. Then we got into this different fight in Iraq and Afghanistan, which was more asymmetrical, right? And now you're getting back to the doctrine of LSCO, or large-scale combat operations. That's how we prep for the next fight. We have to have a capability for our medics being very well trained. They need to perform as advertised because they may be taking care of this patient, prolonged field care, for quite a while. When I was in Ukraine, we had one train that went from east to west, and hell, they used to blow it up every night. So you look at other sources of evacuation, and they just target whatever. They don't care. So it was a hit and miss. And if some poor patient to survive the 4 days or 5 days across that train ride, well, hell, they may make it if you got them as far west as Lviv. Anyway, so it's a different fight for us. We have to have enhanced capabilities at the point of injury and be prepared to hold them longer, as you've heard the other gentleman mention. And we have to, I think the base is building up the capabilities that they have in Ukraine for themselves organically. None of the docs that are there can leave. They stopped those guys from leaving, so they're stuck there, and they're all civilians. The farther east you go, they're more kind of Russian-speaking, Russian-trained in their medical capabilities, and the farther west is more kind of a British medical system, speak more Ukrainian, but they are merged together. One thing that has brought them together is the mission. They all want to take care of the people, do the right thing. And I think that's what the challenge is going to be for them. They need to end this thing, obviously, because I don't think they're going to get the this trench warfare that Dr. Blank and others have mentioned is a real deal. They're kind of at a stalemate largely. And we don't need to be distracted with other wars, but unfortunately that's kind of the way it goes. So I'll kind of end with that and be ready for your questions. I do want to say that there's a quote from Winston Churchill. You guys know who Winston Churchill was. You guys are all political scientists and stuff. You guys know this stuff, right? During the World War II, he was the Prime Minister for United Kingdom, England. And he said, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And so all of us can contribute. You're all here, I think, and I've talked to several of you, because you're service-minded. Don't forget that. You can contribute, you can help, you can take care of your communities, you can help these other nations, if that's what your aspiration is to do. You can all contribute in some way, and it's all important, because it is a team sport. We're biased on the medical side because we're your most valuable tool, but we are a tool, right? And we all work together. So thanks for what you're going to do in the future too. And I'll pause there in case there are any questions. Over to you, Dr. Blank.
Thank you. And I would add to your comments that a lot of volunteers are providing services in Poland. That is, it's
Yes, sir.
across the border. They're less of a target there, though, they kind of go back and forth across the border, I suspect. But I know there's a fair number of retired military medical folks in Poland trying to help, with training, with even patient care. So that's part of it. And with that, let's open it up to the audience for questions. Obviously, I can't see them, so if one or both of you who are there would, point at whoever is asking the question. And if not, if there are no questions, I have a few to go.
So I know the gentleman, the National Guard guy, has a question. Followed by the Navy young lady. You're next.
Sir, you mentioned the IFAC. How would you like to see that change from the GWAT to LISCO operations?
Yeah.
I know a lot of us, I was deployed, we had our mission IFAC, but a lot of us brought other stuff too. Not in Somalia, it was Pioneer Center, it was Germany, which was the hour.
Right. It's a good question, but it comes back to tactics, techniques, and practices. We're supposed to be a learning organization. So we take those lessons learned, well, rather than stick them in a binder on the shelf, we have to actually implement them to our doctrine. So updating that technology, updating that equipment is key. And I'm going to turn that one over to you because I know that's in your area.
Well, there's some innovations in the tourniquet space that I think are really important. I mentioned tourniquet conversion. Once you get to cover, you've got to reassess. So that requires some training. You've got to know what pulsatile bleeding looks like. You've got to be able to, if necessary, relocate that tourniquet to the lowest possible location. And then there can be novel technology like things that Dr. Johnson is working on to, for example, have some sort of sensing capability, so it's only as tight as it needs to be. There's also this concept of a civilian or layperson tourniquet that doesn't have all the fail points of a military-grade tourniquet. So lots of opportunities there. As far as other things, I think the Israeli bandage is a little underrated. I would highly commend that. It's got great utility after you sort of reassess your tourniquet situation. And then, we need to have some capability for blood transfusion. So I envision future IFACs having some sort of Rolo, Ranger, Type O, whole blood transfusion capability.
That's a key point that definitely is needed there, because what we did was we ended up getting volunteers to line up and give whole blood. That's how we transfused it. It's like, what is this? What we had in Iraq and Afghanistan, we had the ability to move blood supplies and provide that. Now we needed, hey, come here. You haven't been stuck today, have you? Come here.
Called blood on the hoof.
Right?
Warm donors.
All right, young Navy lady.
Can I just add one point to that?
Yeah, please.
I would just add that especially as we are thinking about large scale combat operations, is that we may not have folks for a walking blood bank. They are either actively engaged or dead. So we need to be thinking about blood product substitutes. Because we're going to rapidly run out of blood in a LISCO situation, and we're not going to be able to get resupplied, and we need to think about alternatives to blood to keep folks alive.
Yeah, it's a different fight totally. Dr. Blank, you reminded me of something when I heard Jeremy had mentioned this. My last tour in Afghanistan, I was a Surgeon General. We had to track the golden hour. And Sec Defense, Yates, was hot on it. Before I went down range the last time when I was leaving the Pentagon, he brought me in his office. He said, "Doc, I don't want to hear any more controversy about this golden hour." He goes, "This is what we're going to do." Because, they would talk about the platinum 2 hours and things we could do to prolong that. He says, "I understand 3 dates. My birthday, my anniversary, and the golden hour." So we had to track those things, and when I was a Surgeon General, we would compile that issue. If we missed the golden hour on anyone, we'd report it back to him. And he actually called me when we missed a couple of them. What the hell happened here? It was a weather thing, or was this, or was that, as long as it wasn't a bad outcome. But we were very good at what we did. You were better off being wounded in Iraq or Afghanistan or height of operations than anywhere else in the world. Again, the finest vertically integrated trauma care system in the world, because we had the capability and we're damn good at it, right? Different scenario, different fight right now.
Question from the Navy officer.
Hello, my name is Dominique. I feel like this would probably be more of a comment and then with the question, but after sitting here, I guess I realized how
I can take a quick stab at that. That's one of our biggest challenges is public education. Without the public support and their knowledge that our medical system is sliding into the peacetime effect, there won't be any sort of rallying cry or call to action. America's, the public expects their sons and daughters that are sent into harm's way to receive outstanding medical care. And if that happened today, or as it happened in Iran, I believe we did pretty well. We're still processing the after action reports, but I think we could have done much better if there had been public awareness. And so we need people writing op-eds and white papers and position papers and getting onto the news, things that folks in uniform can't do to raise the alarm, sound the alarm. But I think it's really a issue of public education.
No, that's absolutely correct. We always reinvent the wheel, and we're doing it again. Hopefully, we are reinventing what might be needed. We have one more question because we're at the end of the hour. One more.
Hi, my name's Alexa. I'm a cadet here at the University of Utah for the Army. So basically, Dr. Bradley was talking about boots on the ground and training. Right now we have standard doctrine, right, to understand TRIC, and again with tourniquets. But I was kind of wondering, how do you foresee doctrine changing over the next couple of years, and how quick do you think those changes will be implemented based on the fact that changes are very slow in the Army and we need to change quickly?
One of my Army colleagues.
You want me to take that?
Yes, sir.
I'll start it, you can finish it, right? It's a great question, by the way. So one of the advantages of Iraq and Afghanistan, another lessons learned was the Tactical Combat Casualty Care, TCCC, you heard a reference at, where we for the first time standardized battlefield care protocols. That was huge for our training. That's a lessons learned. Remember, it's only a lessons learned if you apply it. That was huge. So, and it's still evolving. It's a living document. Because as the nature of the wounds change, we have to be able to train folks differently and take care of them. The other thing that was a great advantage for us during that period of time is the JTS, the Joint Trauma System, where the guys went downrange, collected accurate data, which we're a learning organization. We could see what the wounds were, see what was going on, see what the patterns were, see how we could address that. Where do we need to adjust accordingly? I'm a head and neck surgeon by training. We said, because the number one killer was head and neck trauma, we saw that, and here's the data, we started deploying those kind of guys downrange, that type of thing. Again, learning from that type of thing, we codified it, and does that address your question at least partially? And did you want to add anything to that?
I feel like we're doing ourselves a disservice by not actively learning from the Ukrainian conflict, and I'll just continue to underscore that. It's a policy situation. Policies can be changed, but only if there's the political will and an outcry.
Awesome. And
Dr. Bradley, any comments?
I would just say, some of those comments were correct. Sometimes it's a little slow to implement things, but it requires folks like myself in the position that I'm in to push things like TCCC and the like up the chain quickly to get them implemented.
Thank you. Tom, Jeremy, any final remarks?
No, sir.
Sir, again, I know we're out of time, but again, I just want to thank you and General Cook and the whole team here, and all of you guys for being here once again. And thanks for, and most importantly, what you're going to do in the future. Okay? Thanks very much.
Hey, and just a final one from me. Since I'm moderator, I get to do this real quickly. We've properly been focusing on trauma, surgery, combat casualty care. Remember, there's a whole society that is going to have significant post-traumatic stress and all the consequences thereof that we're going to have to deal with in the aftermath. And this is not too early to begin thinking of it, as obviously we're dealing with the more immediate issues. So with that, I conclude and thank the panelists, the audience, and everyone who put this together. Thanks, Justin, and take care.
Awesome.
We're good
Thank
to
you
go.
guys for coming as well. If you'd like to stick around and speak with our panelists, we'll be here for a little while. Also, if you are an ROTC cadet or midshipman, we have an exclusive lunch event for you guys as well. So if you could be here at noon, that'd be great. We'd love to see you.
Hey, you could do DoorDash for me for the lunch.